Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unearthing the absolutely incredible and honestly vastly overlooked life of a true scientific pioneer. We're talking about someone whose discoveries were literally world-changing. I mean, she fundamentally altered our understanding of the Earth itself. And yet, she was pushed to the margins of history simply because of who she was.
So, let's dive right into this paradox. How does a brilliant mind shatter our entire understanding of the natural world only to be totally ignored by 19th century England? Her findings actually provided the crucial evidence that helped shape Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. But, well, because she was a poor woman with zero formal education, the elite society of the time just refused to take her seriously. To really grasp how she changed the world anyway, we've got to start at the very shoreline, where her whole story kicked off.
Picture this beautiful, rugged stretch of beaches and cliffs in southwest England. Today, we know this 152-kilometer expanse as the Jurassic Coast, and it's celebrated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its incredible rocks and, of course, fossils. But back in the early 1800s, this was just home. Mary was born right here in Lyme Ridges in 1799 to a really humble family. Her dad, Richard, was a carpenter, but to make ends meet, he'd hunt for shells, curious stones, and fossils along these exact beaches to sell in their little shop. So for Mary, these ancient treasures were just as familiar as the wooden furniture her dad built.
Part 1. Surviving the storm and finding the first monster. Let's see how this incredible journey begins.
Mary's early life is just this intense timeline of pure resilience. When she was only 15 months old in 1800, a traveling circus came to town. A sudden storm broke out, and the three girls watching her ran to hide under a tree. Tragically, lightning struck. The older girls were killed instantly, but miraculously, little Mary survived. Her parents plunged her into a bucket of water to revive her, and from that wild start, she actually grew up learning to clean and identify fossils with their dad, which, by the way, was deemed highly improper for a girl back then. But then tragedy struck again. Her father died of tuberculosis in 1810. So suddenly, Mary is an 11-year-old orphan, relying on her love for paleontology quite literally just to survive.
And those survival skills quickly turned into absolute scientific mastery. Just a year later, in 1811, her brother Joseph spotted a really strange fossilized skull stuck in the cliffs. Mary took over from there, spending months painstakingly excavating the rest of the creature from the rock. And when she was done, it was a skeleton that utterly baffled everyone. The locals legitimately thought these kids had dug up a monster, while the bewildered scientific community tried to brush it off as, just a crocodile.
But let me tell you, it was definitely not a crocodile. 5.2 meters. That is the staggering length of the bizarre skeleton this young, self-taught girl meticulously pulled from the cliffside. Just imagine the sheer physical labor, not to mention the extreme precision required for an 11-year-old to pull that off. It's mind-blowing. Now, the really crucial point here is what this 5.2-meter creature actually meant for science. Scientists eventually named it the ichthyosaur, or fish lizard, though today we know it was a marine reptile from about 200 million years ago. But back then, this discovery absolutely terrified the establishment. Why? Because it popped up right as Georges Cuvier, the father of paleontology, was arguing that catastrophic events caused mass extinctions. The ichthyosaur directly challenged the strict religious views of the era. The thought process was basically, if God created nature perfectly, it's totally irrational to think he'd let a species just vanish forever. Yet here was Mary, holding the physical proof that entire species had, in fact, vanished.
Part 2. Super predators and flying reptiles, because she definitely didn't stop at the ichthyosaur. Mary's absolute genius shone through again in 1823 when she found the very first complete skeleton of a plesiosaur. This thing was a terrifying marine superpredator, perfectly adapted with a long neck for hunting. And the fossil was so incredibly bizarre that Georges Cuvier himself initially accused it of being a fake. Think about that. Cuvier was famous for reconstructing entire animal anatomies from just a couple of bone fragments, and even he couldn't believe what Mary had found was actually real. Ultimately, Cuvier and the elite, male-dominated Geological Society of London had to swallow their pride. They confirmed the plesiosaur was real and acknowledged what a monumental find it was. But here's the infuriating part. They deliberately left Mary completely out of the official record. The very woman who scoured the dangerous cliffs, found the bones, and expertly reconstructed the skeleton got absolutely zero official recognition. But honestly, she was totally undeterred by the snub and just kept on making history. Moving beyond the ancient oceans, she literally started uncovering the rulers of the prehistoric skies. Mary discovered the very first pterosaur ever found outside of German territory. These were massive flying reptiles with this highly specialized bird-like anatomy, and they were the largest flying animals to ever exist on the planet.
And she wasn't just digging up bones either. Yep, Mary Anning was also a true pioneer in studying prehistoric poop. She was the first person to properly identify coprolites, which are feces fossilized through desiccation or mineralization. It really just goes to show that sometimes the most groundbreaking fundamental science can be a little bit messy and, yeah, a bit humorous. She was studying absolutely every aspect of these ancient ecosystems.
Part 3. A Legacy Against the Current.
You see, despite finding the most spectacular fossils on Earth, Mary was up against immense systemic barriers. In the 19th century, women were flat out denied formal scientific education and completely excluded from academic institutions. Mary was entirely self-taught. She hustled to build a vast network of famous scientists who eagerly relied on her expertise. They consulted with her, they bought her fossils. Yet those exact same men kept the doors of institutions like the Geological Society firmly shut to her simply because she was a woman. And because of that exclusion, despite her world-class discoveries, she was trapped in poverty her entire life.
It is genuinely heartbreaking to realize that the woman who was completely reshaping our understanding of the Earth had to rely on charity just to survive. Luckily, her childhood friend Henry Delaberche, who actually became a famous geologist himself, was deeply inspired by her work. So in 1830, he painted a watercolor called Duria Antiquior, a more ancient Dorset, bringing her discoveries vividly to life on canvas. He sold prints of this painting specifically to raise funds to help pull Mary out of total financial ruin.
When you look at her life, there's just this stark, tragic contrast. On one hand, she made monumental contributions to humanity, providing the bedrock evidence that challenged everything we knew and literally paved the way for Charles Darwin. On the other hand, society utterly failed to value her while she was alive. Mary never escaped poverty and tragically died of breast cancer in 1847 at only 47 years old. It took years after her death for the Geological Society to finally recognize her immense talent. She was a true pioneer who cleared the path for generations of female scientists, and she did it all in a world completely dominated by men.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought to ponder. If a genius like Mary Anning, someone who literally pulled monsters out of cliffs and proved that species could go extinct, could be systematically ignored by the institutions of her time, well, who else are we missing? Who gets to record our history, who gets the credit, and who gets left fighting in the dark? Keep that in mind the next time you hear about a great historical discovery. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep exploring.